Good evening, beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum. This is episode 136, and today we will not have a special guest. I'm just going to give some commentary on the recent Kamala Harris and Donald Trump debate, which is technically the second presidential debate. And I was going to originally do a Substack publication, but I've decided to forego that because I've just been a little bit stressed lately. Can't think straight. And so I think just giving a commentary on this is the best way to do this. It shouldn't take long, probably a 20-minute episode. And I'm going to kind of read off what I was going to originally publish on the Substack, which is still related to the visibility aspect of the debate. And then I'll give some commentary on the Kamala Trump performance, is what I'll call is a performance. That's a kind way of describing what I witnessed on that particular night. I want to say before we get started that we're almost at that 1,000 sub mark. So please tell your friends and family to subscribe to us for free. It doesn't cost you a dime, just a little bit of your time to expand your mind. And remember, you can't unthink free thought. We're almost at the 1,000 subscriber mark. It's really important for this channel to be monetized. We're not asking for your money. YouTube can pay us if we get enough subs. A lot of people watch the show. We kindly appreciate that. We respect everything that the audience does. But just tell a few more people to subscribe to our channel for free. It doesn't cost them. We're not asking for your money. If you want to donate, you can definitely donate to us. We have super stickers and super chat possibilities to where you can do that. But at this particular time, we're just trying to get to 1,000 subs and keep pushing forward. You know, it's probably out of the ballpark to get 20,000 by the end of the year, but there's still something that we're going to strive for. And hopefully people can get the information. We continue to expand my channel more and more and get these esteemed guests onto the show. This episode 136 is, again, more or less an immersive episode. We're going to talk about the Kamala Trump debate. I'm going to read off what I was going to originally publish on the Substack. And it was going to be entitled Debate or Debase, because it was honestly a reductionism at its finest when we talk about the actual issues. A lot of issues were avoided, and I blame the moderators for that, even aside from the two candidates that we have to choose from. Or do we have more than two options to choose from? It was originally entitled Debate or Debase, Reductionism of Political Discourse in the Second Presidential Circus Show, featuring Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Why just Trump and Harris? My initial impression of this debasement of political discourse on Tuesday, September the 10th, left me thinking about the FEC, which is the Federal Election Commission, and the guidelines and the need to include more voices on the debate stage. When a person decides to run for president, they must apply with the FEC, which legally declares candidacy. If Democrats and Republicans can run 20 candidates within their own parties for a primary, why can't the country have 20 different presidential candidates across political persuasions for the general election? I propose that the broader public vote for the initially declared candidate via an online poll. This stage would technically be a preliminary stage with one significant caveat. If an FEC presidential candidate, which I just mentioned, everyone has to file with the Federal Election Commission to be a candidate. If this presidential candidate gains 1% in the public survey that I just mentioned, this is, again, one of my proposals, then the candidate will automatically qualify for a nationally televised debate and interview. So that gives people visibility options. Under these criteria for the 2024 cycle, for instance, Marianne Williamson, Jill Stein, Cornel West, Chase Oliver, and Robert Kennedy Jr. would have qualified for an exclusive interview and a public debate where CNN, all these people, Fox, ABC, NBC, whoever wanted to sponsor it could do it if they wanted to. But I'm going to even go a step further than that. For this hypothetical scenario, the top 20 people will qualify for a televised debate and interview run by the nonprofit League of Women Voters, which used to be the case. instead of the for-profit mainstream media outlets that I just mentioned. So instead of the mainstream media outlets, if they decided not to do it, you could get another set of eyes with the legal women voters. After the televised debate and extensive interviews, the public will poll the 20 candidates until the top 6 people remained using a ranked choice voting or a star voting method system. Star voting score, then automatic runoff. It's a different method system. It's not like ranked choice voting, but you kind of get the picture. So I'm introducing 2 alternative methods to the first past the post system that we have now, which is simply you select a candidate, but prior to that, there's no kind of a process to weed out other candidate or weak candidates. I would argue that Donald Trump and Kamala Harris are weak candidates. So we don't even have the process in place to weed these weak candidates out in the first place, to where we have more democratically available options at our disposal. We don't have that right now. There are people running outside of these 2 people that I mentioned, but we don't have to keep going over this over and over again about the visibility aspect, the corruption as far as these elections are not publicly funded. You can refer to my first Substack if you want to look at some of the available names: Claudia de la Cruz, Cornel West, Dr. Shiva, Dr. Stein. We have Chase Oliver running as a libertarian. You got Jasmine Sherman running under the Unicorn Party. You have Gavin Bonney. You have Brittany Jones. Everyone has basically been on my show, in addition to several other independent and third-party candidates are also running in the field. RFK dropped out, endorsed Trump, but he's still available on some of the state ballots. You have options, but those options are not being encouraged at this time. This forum does the exact opposite. We're trying to encourage alternative options to the duopoly. You all know where we stand now, 136 episodes in. If this is something that you don't like to listen to, this is not the forum for you, because we don't concentrate our energy within the 2 parties. We concentrate them outside of the 2 parties. We're trying to build something outside of this system. Otherwise, it's going to be the same talk 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 years down the road. And we're trying to avoid those conversations. We're trying to push something outside of this 2-party system. So after all this is done with the star voting and then the ranked choice voting, again, this is a hypothetical situation. This is something that I propose. These remaining 6 people will be the final candidates in the general election. So that's better than what we have now, more than 2. I'm talking about 6 visible options that people get to see all the time, not the 2 that we have to choose from, where people feel like they have to choose from. They would qualify for all the televised debates leading up to Election Day, but write-in options would be acceptable if these candidates are insufficient for some voters. So even outside of the 6 people, write-in options under my system and my proposal will still be available. This is hypothetical, but it gives people a look into future democratically and publicly funded elections. For more information on people running for public office at any level, go to ballotpedia.org. Ballotpedia, you can find any person running for public office. Ballotpedia.org. BALLOTPEDIA.org. O-R-G. Ballotpedia.org is a very useful website for people to get visibility, just because a lot of people are running for office and no one knows about them until you go to this particular site that I just mentioned, ballotpedia.org. It's a great database for people running for public elections, even for just proposals and propositions, ballot initiatives, anything like that is going to be available on that site. The marijuana debate questions coming up on the general elections, not just the presidential election, but there are all these different types of proposals, like whether it be abortion, gun rights, or anything. These things are on the ballot. It's not just the candidates on the ballot. And I guess my only thing to add to this particular portion of this conversation, 136, would be when you're choosing a person for the duopoly purposes, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, you're not just picking Donald Trump and Kamala Harris you're also endorsing that party because there's a letter next to that person's name. So remember that when you're in the ballot, you're not just picking Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. You're choosing a party. If you were really choosing a person, they wouldn't have support of a party. So remember, when you're endorsing these two candidates, you are promoting their agendas. You're promoting the Democratic and the Republican Party agendas, respectively. Doesn't matter how much anti-establishment rhetoric that they say that they have, you're endorsing not only that person, but you're endorsing their party. That's what you are endorsing. So if you don't like the wars, that's what you endorse. In fact, that's what you are endorsing, are the wars. Everything that you said you're against, the big business, all the corporate greed and stuff, when you choose these two people, that's what you're endorsing. And you can't say that you didn't know about this ahead of time, because that's exactly what it is. Enough with me lecturing the public. Let's get to my reaction to the actual debate. I'd like to say that the one thing that stood out to me was the lack of a platform, really, of Kamala, especially. Because I don't know if y'all remember this, but prior to September the 10th, the Harris-Walz campaign didn't even have a public policy listed on their website, on their official website. They do now, conveniently. It's almost like they took a stenographer and that person was recording everything that they said during the debate. And then after they did the debate, they put that information from Kamala onto her website, and that became their policy positions. But I'm not even making this stuff up. Prior to September the 10th, there was no public policy, not even one stated, on the Harris-Walz website. I brought this up during the Cornel West interview the first time, that they didn't have any policy, anything at all. Nothing was on their site. If this was anyone else, if this was a third-party candidate, or even Trump for that matter, they didn't have one policy position on their website 60 days before a national election, could you imagine the condemnation that that person would go under? The scrutiny that they would go through? I'm the double standards. But because this person is the Democratic nominee, and that's debatable, they weren't even nominated. They were selected because the original candidate, they didn't even have primaries. And then he drops out, and then she's the VP pick, and all the delegates go to her. Again, you can debate the merits of that, but it is what it is now. Unfortunately, we expect corruption pretty much at this point from the two parties. But the one side of the ruling class party that's in control, the D side versus the R side, we're focusing on the D side right now. So that we have that. Prior to the debates, she had no policy positions on her site. So when you look at what she says, she talks about an opportunity economy. I believe that this is a subliminal message, and she borrowed this from the Donald Trump opportunity zones from his 2016 campaign, when he proposed this platinum plan that was used to help the Black communities, the lower income communities. This is the way he worded it. So in his platinum plan, he stressed opportunity zones to help low income families in disenfranchised communities. And so you can kind of interpret whatever language you want to with that. To me, I equate that he's trying to help the Black and Hispanic. He loves saying the Hispanic and Blacks. I mean, he says pretty much what's on his mind. And that's the way I interpreted this. Kamala is using the opportunity economy as a more general rhetoric or rhetorical tool versus Trump's more ethno-specific policies in certain areas. This is just my interpretation again. And she didn't really mention Black people at all in her particular policy on this debate stage. There wasn't a Black agenda. So she kind of sidestepped the racial, even when they asked the question about, Donald Trump calling her out on her not being Black. She even not sidestepped that question. It was like a slam dunk question for her to say, I'm a black woman, this and that. She didn't even address the issue. So she's presenting herself as a general candidate, kind of de-emphasizing the racial component. I don't know if that's her decision or her team's decision, but regardless, that's what they're doing right now. The opportunity economy, she talked about the middle class. Neither candidate addressed poverty. They didn't even say the word poor, I don't believe, to my recollection. They didn't use the word poverty. Middle class, to me, is a buzzword now for small business owner and a certain class of people. So this word excludes people who aren't part of the political process anymore. So these are people who don't want to vote. So for people who don't vote, for people who are the working poor, for people who are homeless, Kamala and Donald Trump aren't speaking to those people. Kamala and Donald Trump are speaking to people who have families. I don't believe that they're speaking to single people. They're speaking strictly to people who have families, who have a desire to own a home, or for people who actually own a home. According to Jasmine Sherman, when we had their interview with us, the last time we interviewed Jasmine, they were saying that 96% of the people in this country don't even own a home. But Kamala and Trump is speaking to these people. It's almost a fake group of people. This whole idea of a middle class, people who work paycheck to paycheck. I don't know. They would have to define middle class for me to buy even into that rhetoric, because I'm not convinced that the middle class that they're talking about is the same middle class that I was accustomed to when I was growing up in the 90s. I don't use the term middle class because it's too ambiguous. I don't know what it means. And I think it's deliberately meant to be like that. So I think that these people are speaking to 80,000 and above combined income in a family. That's the way I interpret middle class, the way they use it. And these people are politically engaged. You have to keep that in mind. These people are people who are going to vote for Trump or Kamala in the first place. So to answer that question, I believe that most people are already decided when it comes to the duopoly. They pretty much know who they're going to support, Kamala or Trump. Economy was talked about 10 to 15% of the time in the debate. So that was the first question, was an economic question from the moderators. And after that, they go directly into all the quote unquote, the controversial red button issues, whether it's abortion, whether it is Gaza, Israel, the border, race. Like none of this stuff pertains to economic policy at all. Economics can tie into more important issues if they framed it that way, but that's not the way it's framed. It's framed to basically set up the duopoly vote. So you're basically framing it as, okay, we're going to go between Harris and Trump. We're going to exclude everybody else. This is the moderator. This is the psychological warfare that's being used against us right now. They're already framing it to where there's only two options. And so within those two options, each side is going to decide, okay, who do we choose, Harris or Trump? That's the seed that the moderator is already planting in your head. Doesn't matter if it's the Democratic or the Republican side. That's the way that's used. If you're reading between the lines as an outsider, me in this case, I'm an outsider. I don't support either party. So I'm reading this from an outside lens. Very little on her economic policy, and Trump's too. Trump's answer to everything seemed to be the border, these illegal immigrants. He had a very poor showing, in my opinion. The only thing that Trump stood apart to me in versus Kamala was foreign policy, and his foreign policy is weak, but that's not saying much when you have to compare it to the Democratic nominee. It's all, I mean, The fact that he can use his foreign policy and present himself as the anti-war candidate should be very concerning. But that's where we are. Trump is the anti-war candidate if you base it on the duopoly. He's not a truly anti-war candidate, but he's framed that because we know that both parties are bought up by the war machine and everything else. But the fact that he's even able to market himself as an anti-war candidate, and then he have all these other warmongers endorsing them. Tulsi Gabbard is a warmonger. RFK is a warmonger. They present themselves as peace candidates depending on which war it is. So with Ukraine and Russia, that seems to be Trump's go-to, but he sidesteps the Gaza, Israel, the genocide that's going on right now in Gaza. But we'll get to that in a second. So economics, Trump talked about tariffs for about 10, 15 minutes, it seems. He's very confident that he's going to just, tax these other countries, China and our enemies, and he's going to hold them accountable that way. But that's pretty much all I heard from economic policy. Neither side wants to give a single-payer healthcare system. There's no kind of talk of a healthcare agenda. I think if we had a universal healthcare system like they enjoy in Congress, we wouldn't even be talking about abortion right now because it would already be baked into the equation. Wouldn't even be a discussion. I take Cuba as an example. The last interview I did with Tracy Carson, I made this point that even in a country like Cuba that has very conservative people in that government, the fact that trans people can get surgeries conducted because they have the same health care as everyone else, it is not a debate of whether you agree with trans people getting surgeries or not because they have the same health care. If we have the same health care, that's less of a debate. And those people in Congress, I don't know if you noticed that, but they have the same health care, and it seems to be working just fine with them. So why don't we have that health care that they have in Congress? I don't see them giving up their plans. But we're told that it's a communistic, a socialistic system. So if it's so communistic and socialistic and it's an evil thing, then why don't they give up their health care and give it to the citizens? I don't hear that kind of talk. So all talk about Donald Trump, communism, a Marxist. Kamala is not a Marxist. If you know anything about Marxism, it's just a way to get his voters solidified. It's a way to solidify his base because his base is too dumb to understand political theory. And I'm not going to be, filtered anymore. I understand that you got to keep some people in line to kind of, convince them. But some people just don't want to be convinced. The Trump people don't want to convince themselves. They don't want to change themselves. They don't want to be open to new ideas. And the Kamala people are the same way. Both sides are really the same. And this is as an outsider. Both sides are cults in the sense that their candidate can't do any wrong. You can make the argument that Trump people they're voting red no matter who. And Kamala's people are voting blue no matter who. Neither side is open to any alternative views but their own. Trump can't do any wrong and Kamala can't do any wrong. If you talk to some of these people that I follow, that's kind of the thought process. They're just trying to keep Trump out, and the Trump people are trying to keep Kamala out because she's a communist. She's authoritarian and he's authoritarian. I agree with that. I wouldn't use communism as the word. Authoritarian is probably the right way to use it. Both parties are consolidated authoritarian parties. That's the easiest way to put it without this left, right. Like I've said before in previous episodes, I'm not even convinced that Donald Trump is even a Republican. Whatever he is, he's not a Republican in the traditional sense. And he's very much, he could easily have ran. I've made this argument before that he could have ran in the Democratic Party and won the Democratic nomination. That's just the way it is now. The D's and the R's are interchangeable. The same people who support them, the fossil fuel industry, the war, the pharmaceutical, all those people, the Israel lobby, whoever it is, They all support those candidates anyway. Anyone is running under the DR ticket. So it doesn't matter if it's Donald Trump that you put in there. It doesn't matter if it's Dick Cheney, who's now a Democrat. It doesn't matter who you put in. They're interchangeable. The never Trumpers are Democrats. And they always were. The Reagan Democrats are now the new Trumpers who are now the old Trumpers. It doesn't matter. They're still part of the duopoly. You're still supporting a D or an R. And that's the way, when people say that they're independent, like Tracy was saying in the last episode 135, they're using independent within the two parties. We don't use independent that way here on Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum. We use an independent as you're truly independent of the Democrats and the Republicans. That means outside of those two, not within the Democrats and Republicans, you're undecided and you're ultimately going to succumb to Trump or to Kamala. That's what the mainstream media, that's the way they use independent. We use independent in a completely different way in this forum here. And that's the reason why we're not going to be as popular. We understand that we're going against the headwinds of the mainstream media and everybody else. But at some point, people need to take their principles into consideration, and they need to vote based on their principles if you even decide to vote to begin with. If people don't vote, I don't shame them. I understand why people don't vote. I've chosen not to vote several times in the past. I don't even know if I'm voting this time around. It's just there are options there. But again, I'm not going to tell people how to vote, but I'm just saying that the system that we have now is not a democratic system, doesn't give people the options, and doesn't empower the voter the way that they say it empowers the voter. Opportunity zones, opportunity economy. I think a lot of it's word salad. And opportunity for who? Like I said, I believe it's a false illusion. The middle class, I don't know who this group of people is that they're talking about. They would have to define that first of all, but the moderators aren't going to press them on that kind of a question. Gaza, Israel, both candidates are pro-genocide. Both candidates are okay with that war. I know that Trump says in the debate that it wouldn't have happened under him, but he's still, when he's pressed on it, if he's ever pressed on it at all, he always uses the Russo-Ukrainian war as like he seems to be more invested in that war than he is the Gaza-Israel situation. So that's the strategy he's used to present himself as an anti-war candidate. Oh, it would have never happened. That's his answer to everything when it comes to foreign policy. And even the moderators, when we talk about things outside of the United States, it's almost like there's only 6 countries that exist: Mexico, China, Venezuela, Gaza, Israel, Ukraine, and Russia. Those are the 6, 7 areas. That's U.S. foreign policy in a nutshell. NATO was mentioned quite a bit towards that segment. There was no mention of BRICS whatsoever, the BRICS coalition that we talk about a lot about on this forum. The upcoming BRICS conference is going to be in Kazan, Russia in October. But you pretty much, the debate was a waste of time. There's not a lot to discuss because a lot of the issues aren't, they don't attack poverty at all. Very little discussion, if any, about healthcare. They talked about the Affordable Care Act, and either side, both of them are promoters of the Affordable Care Act. They want to put band-aids on the Obamacare stuff. And Trump admitted he doesn't have a plan at this time. He said that during the debate. So you guys are supporting a candidate that doesn't have a healthcare plan. And Kamala doesn't. Her plan is Obamacare. They don't have a plan. They won't tell you. Again, I was telling you about their healthcare plan. They don't want you to promote what they're enjoying right now. So they're basically tell you, you're going to get these crumbs. We're part of the oligarchy, and what you guys get is what we're going to tell you you're going to get. Whatever our our lobbyists or our donors tell you, that's what you're going to get. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. 30 minutes, that's where we're at. I hope you enjoyed the few thoughts I had about it. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to write a Substack. My mind isn't in the right place right now to write a Substack. Got a lot going on right now. Beautiful people, enjoy this. I hope you enjoyed this episode 136. Please subscribe to your friends and family. Remember, you can't unthink free thought. And we will talk to you soon. Cheers, everybody.